in the Azov Sea
are a clear demonstration that when the basic rules for peaceful coexistence are disregarded,
would extra sanctions be added?
the European Union reflecting
Europe has been flooded with nationalism.
Nationalism is not good.
Which referendum do you mean?
The exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union.
Russia could, in this case, actually start a real war against Ukraine.
The gas sector has to be reformed.
I present today a new episode of my program Eurointegrators, and our guest today is Ambassador of European Union in Ukraine, Mr. Hugues Mingarelli. Hi, Hugh.
Hello.
Nice to see you in my program.
Pleasure for me.
The European Parliament confirmed that there is an escalation in the Azov Sea and the need for new sanctions against Russia. Do you believe it's a new escalation of hybrid war?
The recent events in the Azov Sea are a clear demonstration that when the basic rules for peaceful coexistence are disregarded, tension is bound to rise. The construction of the Kerch Bridge without any consultation or consent with Ukraine was already a violation of the sovereignty of this country. Then we know that because of this bridge, a number of ships are no longer able to reach the Ukrainian ports of Mariupol and Berdyansk. We know as well that Russia has put in place a very, very heavy inspection regime, which has a clear objective to reduce the activity of the Ukrainian ports. And therefore, we believe that all these violations of Ukraine's sovereignty will have a very clear consequence. It will increase the suffering of the population of southeast Ukraine. And it's already a region which is facing a number of challenges that we all know. Therefore, we consider that these actions by Russia are not acceptable. And we will continue to raise in all possible meetings and formats these issues.
Would extra sanctions be added because of this?
We are currently in the European Union reflecting on how to answer to this new aggression against Ukraine's sovereignty. It's clear that we have to reflect as well on how we can mitigate the consequences of these Russian activities on the population of southeast Ukraine, because our ultimate objective is to alleviate the suffering of the population, of the local population. So we are reflecting on which activities are the most appropriate to face these new challenges.
Europe has been flooded with nationalist attitudes and populism. How does it affect EU?
It is true that over the last 2 to 3 years, a number of far-right and nationalist parties have managed to come to power in some EU member states. But first of all, it's still in a limited number of member states. In the majority of EU member states, you do not have this kind of parties at the government. And it's true that they are proposing policies which very often are not compatible with the basic values of the European Union. We believe that it is the duty of all the other member states to help these countries understand that our recent history has been very clear about the fact that nationalism is not good for any people in any country, that migration is a phenomenon which has been affecting European countries for centuries and generally in a positive way, and that therefore there is a way to manage migration flows which allow us to respect the rights of the people, of the migrants, and especially of the asylum seekers, and at the same time make the migration flows manageable for the EU countries. So I am confident that a majority of our EU member states will manage to impose solutions which will respect the rule of law and will be in compliance with our EU basic values.
But in the same time, some parties in Europe were chosen to the parliament of this country by quite strong messages against migrants and against sanctions towards Russia, and even sometimes with special campaign for Russian audience in these countries. Do you think it's coincidence or it was special done steps?
It is certainly not coincidence, but these messages, information policies are based on fake news. For instance, some people say that European member states are flooded by migrants. This is not true at all. If you look at the figures, EU is not at all flooded by migrants. We have a large number of migrants coming from sub-Saharan Africa, coming from the conflict areas in the Middle East, and in this case we have asylum seekers. But nobody can say that the EU is flooded by migrants. And when it comes to the sanction against Russia, we have to better explain and better inform the population in some EU member states about what happened here in the eastern part of our continent in 2014, when basically the borders between Ukraine and Russia were moved by tanks in full violation of the international law. And it's clear that what is at stake here is, first of all, the sovereignty of Ukraine, but it is far more than that. It is the security of EU member states which is at stake as well, and it is therefore in the EU interest to have a clear reaction against this blatant violation of international law.
Do you see desire and attempts of third-party players to destabilize situation in European Union?
We know that a number of our member states consider that in some elections or a recent referenda, foreign countries try to intervene, to influence the outcome of the elections or of this referendum.
Which referendum do you mean?
The referendum on the exit of the United Kingdom from the European Union. Some people say that foreign countries intervene to convince a majority of the Brits that it would be better for them to leave the EU. And we know that one of the countries which is mentioned very often is Russia. And therefore we have to take the necessary steps in the EU and with our partner countries to ensure that elections are an opportunity for all citizens to express freely their views and their political choices without any undue interference by foreign powers, foreign countries.
Which steps do you mean?
We have, first of all, to identify the entities which spread fake news. We have to fight disinformation campaigns which take place in some of our countries. And we have to be more efficient and more committed on all areas related to cybersecurity.
Does it mean that the same steps do you recommend for Ukraine before coming elections?
It's clear, and this is why over the last months we have had a permanent dialogue with the relevant Ukrainian authorities to see how we can cooperate to ensure that the upcoming elections in Ukraine, the presidential election in March and the legislative election in October, will take place in decent conditions. So we are reflecting with our Ukrainian partners on which kind of measures we have to put in place to fight cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns and fake news.
Cybersecurity. Does EU help Ukraine in this direction?
We have had a dialogue with our Ukrainian counterparts for several months now on how we can together cooperate to prevent cyber attacks which might have an influence on the upcoming elections. We have already 4 projects underway, and I hope that it will be possible in the next few months to intensify our cooperation to make sure that the Ukrainian people can choose their political leaders in decent conditions.
Which projects in cybersecurity do you mean?
We have to discuss with a number of law enforcement agencies and media to ensure that any kind of disinformation campaign will be quickly identified and that we will be in a position to counter these activities to the benefit of the Ukrainian people.
Do you think reform of state administration of Ukraine has helped more effective implementation of association agreement?
There is no doubt that over the last 3 to 4 years, there has been a strong political will to improve the effectiveness of the state apparatus in Ukraine. The government adopted a strategy to reform the public administration. This strategy was translated into an action plan with concrete actions, concrete projects, and we, the European Union, have been deeply committed to share our experience when it comes to making ministries and state agencies more effective. I consider that some improvements are already there. We know that there is still a long way to go. We are not yet at the end of our road, but a number of important reforms have been already initiated with new transparent and fair recruitment procedures for the reform support staff of a number of ministries and the reorganization of a number of ministries to make sure that the structure of the ministries is better adapted to the challenges facing the state administration today. So to answer and to sum up in one sentence, yes, some progress have been witnessed without any doubt, but there is still a long way to go to ensure that Ukraine has the necessary state apparatus to modernize the political, social and economic life of the country.
Which areas of improvement you can mention?
I told you that when you look at the recruitment procedures, there is no doubt that we have today recruitment procedures which are far more transparent and fair than a few years ago. If you look at the structure of some ministries as well, it's clear that new directorates have been created to better meet the needs expressed by the Ukrainian society. So we believe that a number of steps have been taken. We have as well, and we have started as well to reflect on the need to have salaries which are adapted to the need to have competent and motivated people in the ministries, in the public administration. So on all these issues, progress has been made, but we have to continue our work and even to redouble our efforts.
One more guest will join our interview now. It's member of Ukrainian Parliament, head of Committee of Foreign Affairs, Hanna Hopko.
Anna, hello, thanks for joining us. My question is the next. Former Deputy Minister of Transport Ministry told me that after the signing association agreement in transport part, there cannot be any deterioration of the previous conditions or terms. But in the same time, Hungary imposed a fee for transporting through its territory that is about 700 euros, including road tax. Why such issues are not resolved with the Vice Prime Minister of Eurointegration? What's your opinion? The matter is that with Hungary, Ukraine have bilateral relations. So the governments of Ukraine and Hungary should raise those issues and try to solve all the problems together.
Окей, я задам це питання ж нашому гостю.
Today we do not have yet an EU-Ukraine agreement in the field of transport, and therefore the issue of market access is still regulated in bilateral agreements. We have to look at what member states are doing, obviously, but I'm not aware that anything which should not be in line with EU commitments has been done, has been carried out by any member state in this field. But once again, we are ready to discuss all this issue with Minister Romelian when it comes to transport. and then to see with our member state that all measures which are taken today in a bilateral context are in line with the objectives of our association agreement, which is obviously to integrate Ukraine into the EU transport network.
What about the level of coordination in the field of Eurointegration after the position of Vice Prime Minister was created? Does it work in the right way? And what do you think? How the Ukraine's representation in EU institution is coordinated? This position was really vital for the country after the revolution of dignity in Ukraine 4 years ago. It was important to create this position, not to waste time. It should be not just a position, but a team of professionals who would conduct coordination with other ministries as well. Also provide coordination with committees responsible for standardization and metrology, improving of products and goods quality. It was needed to meet EU standards and to promote Ukraine's process of Euro-integration. So one of our goals was achieved, and now we're happy to know that in Cabinet of Ministers we have the person dealing with the Euro-integration issues.
So my answer is very clear. Yes, the current Vice Minister for European integration is playing a key and very useful role in promoting Ukraine-EU integration.
Дякую, Anna. As you know, I was also Deputy Minister for European Integration, and I remember that in terms of legislation, we have a recommendation from Council of Europe about what we need to change in field of media, communication, field of our responsibilities. And one of the points was actually changing of law of political advertising, which we developed with Transparency International. As far I bring it to the minister in 1 week, unfortunately, I was stepped out from Deputy Minister for European Integration. And it's not yet implemented, even not raised. Why do you think it's so?
I do not know this specific case, but it's clear that it is a duty of the Ukrainian leadership to take the necessary step to ensure that the election will take place in the right condition. And for that, free media are very important. We are constantly insisting on the fact that in this context, it is necessary to provide the public broadcaster with the necessary funding and to ensure really that media are independent and plural.
I have spoken here with the ambassador of Latvia, and we discussed their elections, which happened several weeks ago, and the difference between Ukrainian election system and their election system. And the interesting thing is about this field is that their media plans of parties are in Nabu. So they have more or less similar conditions with almost the same budgets, and they only can play with messages, responsibilities of politicians, and not really buy through media votes, like in Ukraine happened.
Well, I'm sure that what happened in the Baltic states, and in this case in Latvia, could be a source of inspiration for Ukraine. There is no doubt about that. And by the way, this is the sense of our presence here. We want to share our experience when it comes to putting in place an open and democratic society based on a social market economy. And for that to happen, it is necessary, once again, to ensure that elections take place in decent conditions.
I'm absolutely agree that that's important topic which should be implemented in Ukraine, but unfortunately it's not done yet. But it should be one day. According to sociological surveys, Ukrainians waiting from EU more pressure to put to Ukrainian government. What are you going to do with that?
The only people who can put pressure on the Ukrainian government are the Ukrainians themselves, because they have elected the Ukrainian leadership, and therefore it is up to them to tell them if they are happy or not with the policies they are implementing. What we can do in our case is, as I said several times already, to share our experience. And we do that on a daily basis in all areas of the political and economic life. In addition to that, when we put in place cooperation programs or macro-financial assistance, we attach some conditions to the disbursements of the EU funds to ensure that the reform process goes ahead in the direction which has been discussed between Ukraine and the EU people who have put in place this program. And this way, we have to ensure that the EU taxpayer money is not wasted, but is used in a way which will be of benefit to the Ukrainian people.
What do you think is the main obstacles against Ukraine entering EU?
But today there is no appetite in the EU member state to offer a membership perspective to any additional partner country. This is very clear. The EU has first of all to solve a number of problems that we have and that you know. In addition to that, I would like to tell you that Ukraine has a long way to go to be in the right condition to apply for EU membership. And this is why we have negotiated and signed, and now we implement this association agreement. It is in the interest of Ukrainian people to implement with determination the association agreement to ensure that Ukraine come closer to the EU. But it is as well the interest of the Ukrainian citizen to implement the association agreement to improve their living conditions. And that's what basically we have seen in recent opinion polls, where a majority of Ukrainian people were saying, irrespective of the perspective for our country to join the EU, we have to modernize it along some EU norms and standards. And this is, for me, an evidence of the political maturity of the Ukrainian citizens. Our association agreement is a blueprint for reform. And it is in the interest of the Ukrainian people to improve their living conditions, to take over the norms and standards of the EU in the political and economic life of the country. And then the issue, the question of an EU membership perspective will be approached, will be handled in a more favorable context.
Who, in your opinion, from three countries, Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, are going towards European integration, are leading in fulfillment of association agreement?
Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia are three totally different countries facing different challenges, and therefore there is no point in trying to compare the merits of the three countries when it comes to the path towards Euro-integration. I can just tell you that in Ukraine, over the last 3 to 4 years, a lot has been done by the political leadership to create the right condition to bring Ukraine closer to the EU. The visa-free travel regime. I mean, in order to get the visa-free travel regime, it has been necessary for the Ukrainian authorities to comply with an action plan with a lot of conditions, more than 100 conditions. So it is a merit of the Ukrainian authorities if today there is a visa-free travel regime for the Ukrainian citizens. And the same applies for the implementation of the association agreement. Therefore, I deeply believe that a lot has been done in this regard in Ukraine. I know that in some other countries progress has been made as well. But again, I think that it's not possible to compare because the countries are so different.
From your personal score, which percentage of association agreement Ukraine already fulfilled?
I'm not able to give you a figure. I can just tell you that in some areas, such as competition, state aid, public procurement, serious progress have been made. While in other areas, such as transport, customs, taxation, it's far more difficult to move ahead. But I cannot give you a figure.
With your knowledge of situation in Ukraine and your personal experience with EU affairs and Ukraine, what is your time perspective for Ukraine will be ready from your point of view, entering European Union?
Ukraine is a country with exceptional assets, huge potential. You have in Ukraine an exceptional industrial tradition. You have the best agricultural land on the European continent. You have a very well trained and skilled labor force. You have a fantastic touristic potential. So with all these assets, if the right decisions are taken by the political leadership, supported by your exceptional civil society, I have no doubt that Ukraine will become very quickly very attractive for the European Union. So I will not give you a number of years, but I just tell you that Ukraine could be seen, could be perceived relatively quickly as an asset for the European Union and not as a liability.
Nord Stream 2. Do you have a feeling or your personal opinion that building of Nord Stream 2 could put Ukraine in more danger because Russia could, in this case, actually start a real war against Ukraine?
The European Commission has proposed a few months ago to start trilateral negotiation between Ukraine, Russia and the European Commission as a facilitator to negotiate a new contract for the transit of gas through Ukraine after the end of the current contract in December 2019. So we believe in the Commission, and Vice President Šefčovič is the driving force on this particular endeavor. We believe that even if Nord Stream 2 is built, there will still be the possibility for Ukraine to remain an important transit country for gas. But for this to happen, the gas sector has to be reformed in Ukraine. And in this regard, things are not moving ahead very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Mingarelli, for joining our program.
Thank you to you.
Thanks to all who watched us. See you next week.